Have you ever wondered why we spend so many hours of our lives immersed in stories that never happened? Stories about people who never existed? What is it about fiction that captures us, that holds us, and keeps us coming back for more? As both a reader and a writer of fiction, I'm fascinated by this question. I think there's a simple answer. We read fiction because it's entertaining. I also think that this answer is a given, but it barely scratches the surface of what's really happening when we lose ourselves in a good book. If you're a reader, you know what I'm talking about. Think back about the last time you were completely absorbed in a story. Think about the last time you stayed up until the wee hours of the morning because you couldn't put the book down. For me, the world fades when I get like that. Time becomes irrelevant. It seems to flow differently. The fictional world becomes more real to me while I'm reading than my physical surroundings. Yeah, I know. You're smiling. Either you're smiling because you remember or you're saying you're full of baloney. I don't know which. But the reality is that this immersive experience is universal. Most readers will experience this at some point. I think that it's a fascinating concept all by itself. Psychologists call this narrative transportation. This is something similar, somewhat similar to what athletes describe as being in the zone. It's similar, but not quite. And for an athlete, the athlete is in the moment. His body is pumped up on adrenaline and endorphins and all kinds of wonderful natural chemical interactions that heighten focus and physical activity. What's remarkable to me about a book is how the narrative transportation happens by reading mere words on a page. How is it that words create such a vivid, immersive experience? I think the magic lies in how our minds engage with fiction. When we read about a medieval castle or a distant planet, our imagination fills in the details, the textures, the sounds, the smells, the atmosphere. Our minds pick up the signals the author puts on the page to draw a full image, an image that impacts all of our senses. Now, each reader will create their own unique mental picture. It's going to be shaped. Whatever what you see in your mind as you're reading, is shaped by your experiences and your imagination. As readers, we are not passive consumers of the story. We are active participants in creating this fictional world. That's what draws us in. Can you see how this goes deeper than escapism or entertainment? Fiction serves as a unique laboratory for human experience. Through stories, we live countless lives. We feel emotions we might never encounter in our own experience. We are exposed to and understand perspectives vastly different from our own. Reading fiction with an engaged, active mindset is, I believe, one of the most powerful tools we have for developing empathy and understanding others. Okay, here's an example. I think of Frank Herbert's book, Dune. Yeah, I know it's set on a distant planet, desert planet, with giant sandworms and space politics. And if you're not a science fiction fan, if that's not your choice, just substitute the current time on Earth. There are very many parallels. In Dune, the harsh environment and the precious resource of spice are more than exotic backdrops. They fundamentally shape the culture, the politics, and the personal struggles of every character. Everything we see is through this lens. We explore real themes in Dune about power, about ecology, and human nature. And it doesn't all end happily ever after. It's a very powerful experience. And the world that you create when you read a book like Dune will draw you back time and time again. It's not just about one book. The world that's created becomes power in its own right to draw you back and want more. Fiction provides us with a safe space to explore difficult ideas and situations. Through our stories, we're able to grapple with complex moral dilemmas. We can confront our fears, Or we can imagine a completely different way of living, all from the safety of our comfortable chair. For example, a novel about loss might help us process our grief, while a story about triumph over adversity could inspire us during challenging times. When I lost my husband, for a time, I couldn't read romance, which is something I do enjoy reading. And even in a good solid mystery, I shied away from the any romantic entanglements in my book choice. But somehow, books with a storyline that included grief and loss kept showing up in my reading list, and I realized it was time to allow fiction to help me process my grief and the loss of my love. Was it easy? No. I cried a lot. I didn't finish a couple of books right away. I still cry when I read fiction that includes loss of a spouse. But here's the point. It's healthy and healing. And reading fiction helps me to accept what I cannot change. Making personal connections like this in a story, in multiple stories, show how deeply fiction impacts our lives. Beyond the emotional resonance, though, there's also the craft itself to consider. And again, as a reader and a writer, it's two sides of the same coin for me. What fascinates me both as a reader and a writer is how these elements work to weave together. The most compelling stories make each of these different components, the character, the plot, the setting, themes, and tropes, each of these components feel inseparable. The story is woven in such a way that leaving out one of them would feel like there was something missing. The environment in this type of story inevitably becomes more than a backdrop. It becomes like another character, influencing and shaping everything that happens within it. Again, think back to Dune or any type of any type of book that story that has a lot of global or universal impact, and how important it is to recognize that the environment is as much a part of the story as are the characters. Whether it's a small town romance where the community itself plays a crucial role, or maybe an epic fantasy where the magical system drives the core conflicts. Great fiction creates a world that feels complete and lived in. And that's why it works. This is why we return to our favorite books again and again. We find new layers of meaning every time we open a new one. And that's why certain stories stay with us long after we've finished reading them. They influence how we see our world and understand ourselves. It's also why we go back to our favorite authors time and time again. Because when we find an author who connects with us in that way, we want that again and again. We want that connection. So yes, we read fiction because it's entertaining. But we also read it because it helps us understand ourselves and others better. We read fiction because it shows us new ways of seeing the world. In a real sense, fiction expands our understanding of what it means to be human. At least it does for me. How about you? Why do you read fiction? This has been Tales and Threads. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and keep exploring the stories that shape us.